Hey there, everyone. This is Chris McDonald, and I'm doing a series of Timer Tip Tuesdays. This is our fall series. They're a little bit longer than our previous ones. And last week we went over the new starting line. Today we're going over the new finish line. So with that being said, on your dashboard of GoToWebinar, there is a questions area, and I will try to monitor that as we go. So feel free to type in your questions. I also have Shelly Harris and Matt Avery monitoring those questions as well. So if they see something pop up, over and over again, they'll make sure to bring it up, and we'll kind of pause and answer those questions. Otherwise, I might thumb through some at the end and bring them up. So I will say, if you were not on the new starting line webinar that is on our YouTube channel, and I believe it was emailed out as well, we are going to go over some very small points that are the same. That is because we really feel like that these are going to be some of the more important topics going into 2021. So with that being said, we'll start on in. So again, the new finish line, things we're going to cover, and I know we talked about it last week, or I guess last week was Thanksgiving, so 2 weeks ago. We're going to talk about hybrid and what it is, and then we're going to go into preparing for the finish, the virtual setup and user submitted results, defining the course like for on-site finishes, and then typical timing issues. So again, this information about the hybrid race we did cover 2 weeks ago, but it is very, very important. So part of the reason why we're going back over this is because I think all of us now feel like that the beginning of next year is going to be very similar to right now, or possibly even a few months ago when things were locked down a bit more. People are going back inside. And in a lot of areas, things are kind of clamping down again. And so for you to go out and just put on, or just attempt to put on a live event, you could run into issues, because I know, I think it was Connecticut, shut down all turkey trots at like a week beforehand. So for any event that may have gotten approval for a turkey trot and didn't have a virtual or challenge component, kind of up the creek without a paddle. And it's at this point just highly advised for any on-site in-person event to also have a virtual and or challenge components. So, and that's what we mean when we talk about the hybrid race. So again, we've talked about those rising rates, and we can't even say they're potentially regionally or rules changing. This is happening live in real time. And granted, turkey trots are kind of the biggest running day of the year, and I don't have the figures in front of me. I know Bob blogged about what race day looked like on Thanksgiving, but with all the rules changing, it still is a very, very different landscape out with races. And not only that, but you have hesitant athletes whose just confidence in the event really happening, or secondarily, they're just they're concerned that social distancing guidelines are going to be followed at the race. So by offering these different options, you're able to potentially get a race approved that wouldn't normally be approved. And by working with those municipalities and your city officials, showing that you can put on a safe race is kind of paramount right now. So also having those virtual backup plans kind of could relieve you of some of the potential refunds if the races that you're scheduling are canceled. And also, if you're just the timer and not the event production company, it gives you a way to still provide the race director an option too. Now, granted, we've talked about this 2 weeks ago. You might not be able to bill as much for the data management of a virtual event. However, there is still a revenue stream there, and I would, for those of you that don't think that you can bill for helping out with the virtual event, again, we've been training you this entire pandemic so that you can provide these services at a high level and you can be experts in this. So again, I would just strongly advise you to take a look at how much your time's worth. How much time are you spending on setup, on data management, on results approval, and build that into your contract and have that conversation that, like, you know, this, I'm a professional. I do this for a living. I can help you be successful, and really outline the benefits that they're going to get from this. And so, again, the challenge options are always out there, especially with all the new RaceJoy integrations with challenges. And just as a reminder, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but we're not going to go into specifically how to set things up or how to do things. This is more of a broad overview of where to look and what you should be doing. So with that being said, we're going to encourage you to add these options into your 2021 portfolio. So just a brief overview on these: your on-site defined courses. Obviously, this is the bridge back. It's going to be smaller. We've heard of events happening that are, 3,000 and 4,000 people. However, they're broken up into waves, corrals, individual starts over multiple days. And so all of these are great that they're happening again. However, the social distancing plans for these events need to be very, very specifically outlined so that both your city officials and your athletes feel safe and responsible coming back and racing. So then we have the virtual race anywhere. So this is a mimic to the on-site race, but could be from any location. I think most of you on this call have put on a race anywhere option. So in my opinion, if you're going to be holding a virtual event, at bare minimum, you should be doing a race anywhere RaceJoy option. So keep that in mind. If any of you are not RaceJoy certified, please reach out. It is something that you can really add to the experience for that virtual athlete, which I think we're all finding is super important, whether it's, giving them digital bibs or extra cool swag, finisher medals, but also that race experience with customized cheers and an actual tracking app that publishes their results directly to RunSignup. And then there's also the virtual challenge. This is a cumulative or multi-segmented based on achievements. Matt Avery did an amazing setup webinar. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And you can set up badges. These are the longer events. And again, there's been plenty of information put out there about how to set these up and the benefits on putting on challenges. So with that being said, we are going to get to the finish line. We're already at the start line. So we're going to get to the finish line, and first comes preparing for the finish line. So for those of you that haven't seen Truss in forever, it does still look like that. And by forever, I mean about 6 or 7 months. So when you're preparing for the finish line, it's not just a physical finish line. We're also talking about the virtual finish line as well. So keep in mind that each option is a different race for those virtual on-site and challenge events. And each one's going to have different setup steps and management and verification. And and each can be priced out differently to accommodate the work done to manage the data. So, and what that means is you might have a set pricing that you've used for years for your your 5K timing setup with a start and a finish line. But like I just talked about, you do want to sit down and think about the time and energy you're putting in, and the knowledge base that you have and bring to the table for the event, and price out your virtual and or challenges accordingly. That goes in whether you're packaging RaceJoy into that or having it as a la carte item. But again, in getting to the finish line, there's work involved, and just I'm going to keep reminding you that compensation should be had for the work you're doing, even if it is for a virtual event. One of the other things in preparation is the result setup. We've talked a lot about the virtual result setup, but just something to consider if you've not put on a hybrid event. You're going to have a different result set more than likely for each event. And so you need to make sure that those result sets are clearly defined. Otherwise, your athletes, once they post, they will get confused, or they could get confused. And so maybe it's something as simple as putting a virtual on-course 5K as the title of the result set. So in doing so, you would go into your race day tools under results, edit results, and then once you get there, you have for each result set that you have set up, so, you have an orange edit metadata button, and once you click that button, you actually have a number of options. And I bring this up because we don't talk about this edit function very frequently, but it is something that is very useful. And then also ensuring the results are listed in an organized manner. And so that is the result set order. So again, what you would see is this blue edit metadata this orange edit metadata button. And when you click that, you're going to get a lot of other info. And so the first thing is the result set name. Now, this was just a test event. However, if I was going to have a RFID or UHF timed event where I'm pushing results up and people are physically running with bibs, usually you're setting your result set name in your scoring software that you're pushing things up. So if you're in Race Director or Race Day Scoring, you can change that result set name, and maybe it's you set it to live 5K overall, and then you're setting your 5K RaceJoy on course option to just that, virtual 5K RaceJoy or something, and then you have your Race Anywhere, which would be Race Anywhere. So you get the picture. So another thing you can do that not a lot of people realize is you can hide these result sets on your public results. So by unclicking this and saving it, you actually remove the result set from being visible to the public. So if for some reason you need to update some information within the results, you can click this button, save it. It is removed from the RunSignup site, but you still have it on the back end that you can edit things. So you can enable and disable notifications. One thing to keep in mind is if you are editing your virtual results, a lot of times if you are not listed as the race director, this questions contact email will actually be the race director's email. So you might want to go in early once you set things up and make sure this is changed to your email address if you are the one that is managing the data for the virtual result set. And that's just because, again, you're being paid for it. The last thing you want is for your race director to be getting, hey, I don't see my results, or hey, my phone died. What do I do? So, and then finally, the result set order. All of these are set to 0 initially. So you can see this one set to 4. So by ordering these, 1 is at the top and 100 is at the bottom. So you can actually resort all of your result sets. So personally, I would suggest setting your actual live timed events as like, 1, 2, 3, and then your Race Joy on course as your next set, and then your Race Joy Anywhere as your next set. And again, not all of you are going to have all of these result sets, but it's just a way to kind of group them together and keeping them like, if you have, say, a 10K and a 5K, you would always want to keep the 10K first and the 5K second, only for cleanliness sake. Again, this is just kind of a house cleaning tip, but with all of these different results online, it is a good idea to keep things clean and orderly. So also the virtual results configuration. So again, we've done a number of webinars on how to set these up, but you do want to make sure your configurations are set up correctly. You may need to adjust or merge the result sets. And then again, like I said, Matt did an amazing webinar on challenge events and milestone badges, and sorting, things like that. So you want to make sure that those are set up correctly in advance. And there's a lot of how-to support tools available. However, if you're really confused, you can shoot an email and just see if your setup is done correctly. And you can shoot that to me at crisp@runsignup.com. So that being said, don't shoot an email if you haven't started yet. Just, I would go ahead and dig in, get started, and see how far you can get. So another big thing that we've not talked tons about is the results delivery. So I would strongly advise you to ensure that text and email notifications are turned on, and also that you're streaming the results, if you're timing the result on site, that you're streaming them live to RunSignup. And the reason behind that is next year, I mean, the end of this year and next year, there's going to be a limited need for kiosks and scrolling TVs and receipt printers and things like that. And the reason is any kind of kiosk, whether it be walking up to a Chromebook and typing in your information, or an iPad or a receipt printer where, again, you're touching a keyboard, all of that, you're adding touch points, and that's bad. I know people are going out to grocery stores and things like that and still touching things, but if we can limit things at our events, because a lot of our races have not yet come back, or have not yet come back in full force, by showing that you're not going to have these types of touch points is a huge positive to your municipalities and your health departments. Even that even goes for your scrolling TVs or scrolling screens. And again, it's a gathering point. And granted, the gathering points or the pinch points at the start are a much harder thing to focus on than at the finish. But it is still something to consider. And for those of you, again, that were on the last talk, those pinch points were your packet pickup and your starting line, your physical starting line. And so you've done a great job at this point spreading things out. You don't want to then have gathering points back at the finish line. And then if you're not doing awards on site, or if your awards are going to be later or something like that, consider emailing your PDF awards list to your race director, just again to limit the printing and the handoff. So also setting up finisher certificates, you can do these in advance. We've done a couple webinars on that, and you can also include a scheduled email to ensure that there's that this is going to go out to all your finishers, and you can preset a replacement tag link in the email saying, congrats on being there. So the certificate of completion, if you're not requiring time, especially for your virtual events, you can remove a lot of this information. So, and you can set up different certificates for different races. And so what we have here, I've got the back end for one and the front end for another. So the front end for the Florida Challenge had the placement out of how many, your average pace, and then their time with their event logo, and this is one of the stock backgrounds that they used. However, for this event, it was more to get early, newer novice triathletes interested in the sport. And so what they did is they removed everything except for the participant name. And they put in there, just like you would have a normal certificate of completion, and dropped in the participant name, and this was emailed out, and the results were actually hidden. So there was no results page. People were still submitting their results via both RaceJoy and user submission on their profile, but because they didn't want to encourage it, or they didn't want to make people feel like they weren't fast enough or what have you, they hid the result set and showed the finisher certificate. So again, just some cool ways of managing the certificates. So also with prepping for the finish line is RaceJoy, and that is enabling RaceJoy for all events if you plan on using it for any. You don't have to enable it for every registration option, just each course option. So if you have, say, a 5K and a 1 mile, and both are on course, you would have 2 course options. If you have a 5K on course and a 5K anywhere, that would be 2 options as well. So you also need to make sure your date set are correct, and you're verifying those dates in the virtual results configuration, and your race distance is set up in the race wizard. And then on your RaceJoy setup page, you do want to make sure you're enabling your mobile results, and that way people can publish results from RaceJoy. And then this is a great picture of a staff member at an event doing this, but that is on day 1, monitor RaceJoy. Again, if you're billing people for this service and this use, you are the primary support, like you are the one that is supporting this. So if you're not monitoring this, then I mean, you're not going to know if things are going wrong in advance. So plan at the start of day 1, or the right when your virtual event opens. Make sure that you're monitoring for that first person to go around the course and the results push. And for those of you that don't know how to do that, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but under RaceJoy monitoring, race day monitoring, and you have I actually cut it off on the image, but you can toggle in between events if you have multiple events, and you can see all the flashing blue dots here of all the people running. And then as people finish, you can see the RaceJoy on course result set and their data coming up. So for in-person events, and this is something that I think is a huge benefit, especially if you have elongated race times, consider adding a progress board location along your course where you intend to have timing splits. And so what I mean by that, I'm going to play a video for you. This is the race course in RaceJoy, and this is kind of a poor video quality, but this guy is just about to pass a split point on course. And so plenty of things can happen on course when you leave equipment out for 12 hours. Your battery could die or whatever. Hopefully you've managed that in advance, but still, I mean, anything can happen. So by having RaceJoy as a backup, you can watch these people pass by a point as data is coming into this. For instance, is race day scoring, but you can then go into the progress board if needed, and you have a location with that timing point if by chance you need to backfill data. So hopefully this plays correctly. Yep. So you can see this person moving. They are just about at that point, and I think this is the split point that they're going to come in. So there's Rob something, I can't read his last name, but he has a time, and obviously this updates a little bit slower than the information does that is 3G connected to my decoder here. But again, it gives you backup information. So it's just a kind of another backup to your split data out on course. And most of you have, GPS locations of each of where you're putting your splits, and so it's not very hard to add this into the RaceJoy map. And I would just consider not putting an audio alert there, because unless it's actually at a mile marker, just because this is for back-end use for you only. So now we're going into the virtual user submitted results. And again, for those of you that don't know, anytime somebody says, well, hey, where can I post results? If you go to the results page and you have any event with the event type set to virtual race or challenge, this is at the top once you set up your virtual results configurations. So that's the button you click. So again, we've done a lot of webinars on the virtual results setup and how-tos, so I'm not going to spend tons of time on this. There are really two types that we talk about in terms of user submitted results. One is RaceJoy, and this, in my opinion, is your strongest tool in regards to user submitted results. You do have to remember that bibs must be assigned in RunSignup, and the athlete does need to know what their bib number is. So in due time, we will be linking the profile, and so they won't have to know. But for right now, bibs still need to, the athlete does need to know and put in their bib number when they're setting up RaceJoy for the event. Secondarily, there's manual entry, and that is the button I just showed you. And so they're clicking on that Submit Virtual Results button on the results page. It's at the top. So some things to set up for user submitted results to function. Again, a lot of this is review for a lot of you. One is making sure, step one, that you have virtual challenge as your event type on step one of the Race Wizard, and that your event distance in step two of the Race Wizard is set correctly for each event. This is super important for your Race Anywhere events, because that's where that distance is being pulled from. And like we talked about, there must be an event for each course type. So if you have a 5K and a 1 mile, both on course and Race Anywhere, you'd have to have 4 different events to capture all those course types. They can be hidden, but you have to have all 4 of those. And then you also have to have your virtual results configuration set up. And now we have it set up so you actually get an error if you try to turn these on without your virtual results configurations set up. So some common challenges that we run into, and on this, I would say create stock emails. That way you can respond faster to your athletes when they have questions. So one of the biggest ones is, especially for faster athletes, hey, I hate running with my phone. I'm not going to run with my phone. Or, for some people, they forget to charge their phone overnight and it dies during the run. This would be pointing them towards the manual submission page. The submissions look exactly the same on the results page. So it just pointing them towards that page. And once they see they can post their results and it's in there with everybody else's, 9 times out of 10, they're happy as a clam. So another one is an athlete needs to transfer events. And granted, this seems like something that's not result oriented, but it can become if you start getting emails, or the race director starts getting emails. And so there's 2 options here. If they're different pricing, you can set up pay transfer in between events on RunSignup on the back end. That way they can pay the difference and then transfer themselves. And secondarily, if there is no, which a lot of virtual events do not have a price difference, but consider having alternate events sharing the result set. So, and this doesn't mean so in this scenario, anybody registered for this event could post in all of these events. and again, this is just so that they can go in and publish. Obviously, they could also publish in multiple, but what this does, it just limits those emails of people if the price is the same, of saying, hey, I want to be in a different event, or hey, I want to do the bike instead of the run because I've been injured or something like that. So it just makes it a lot easier for you as the timer if you're the one getting these types of requests. And then also verifying data. And again, we talked about this already, but in my opinion, verifying data through RaceJoy monitoring page is the best way possible. And so again, once you go into the monitoring page, you can click on the course actions. Actually, accidentally hit it right there. But by clicking on course actions, you can go to the progress board, search for bibs, and you can actually see people's data as they're passing certain points along the course. And so this is actually the same information from the previous video that I showed. In this Q 2.39, this is actually the verification point of all the athletes as they ran by that actual physical timing point. You can also set up verification of manual submissions on the back end of the of RunSignup. But just keep in mind that no one's results are going to publish. You're going to have to approve everything. And so if you're not going to be on top of that daily, I would kind of consider not using that function, because you will start getting people saying, hey, I submitted a result, why hasn't it been published? So the finish line. This obviously is not 2020, and I just posted this so that we could all see what a finish line used to look like with people without masks on. So there's really two types of finish lines, and that's shared and separate. And they're those dictated by the event distance, size, the number of staff and volunteers you have available, and the equipment that you have available. And so two of those are kind of set, and that is the staff and equipment. So you likely know in advance if you will have the staff to manage a separate start finish, and you also probably know right now if for a February event, if you've got enough equipment available to do the same thing. And so if you don't have the equipment, obviously you're not going to be able to do it. We talked a lot about the different types of start lines, and talked a lot about gap factor timing, or having open start finish lines, which means that everything's going to be based off of chip start. So again, I just come back to equipment because you're not only talking about the timing hardware that you might have, but if it's an elongated start time and an elongated finish time because it's a longer event, you also have to think about the your power, your data management if you're going to be connected to 3G or 4G LTE. However, the variables that you're going to run into are the event size and event distance, and you can kind of do an approximation in advance so you can help your race directors plan accordingly. And so by taking into account how you're going to start the race, you can calculate how many finishers you're going to have at the same time that you're starting people. So in some scenarios, not a problem, but if you have larger waves or longer distance events, so like in the instance, you have a longer distance event for like a half or a full, a shared start finish might not be a problem, because you have your fastest finisher might be an hour and 10 minutes for a half, or 2:20 and change for a full. And so you starting your waves, you can get them out with no problem. And same thing with shorter events in a smaller field, because you can clear the start finish, you can clear that area in advance. However, most events fall into the shorter event with a solid number of registrants, and that's where you have to think about that separate finish line. So I always look at it as your first finisher in a 5K. And again, I know some of you guys have all-star pros showing up and running 13, 14 minutes in an open 5K road race. Personally, I don't see that very frequently. are normally our fastest finishers, somewhere in the 15 to 16 or maybe even 17-minute mark. So you start doing back math and you say, all right, we're going to have waves. Like our health department's dictated that we're going to be starting waves of no more than 20 people at a time every 3 minutes. And so you start doing the math and saying, all right, well, if we're expecting, 15 minutes every 3 minutes, we're going to be starting a wave. So you also don't want to be starting that last wave right when you're expecting your first finisher. So you have to have that buffer range as well. So if you're starting 20 people every 3 minutes, you're looking at having to have a start finish line separated if you have more than 100 registrants. Now, again, those variables change if you're going to do shorter gaps in between waves, or if you're going to do larger waves that are spread out. I think a lot of people are doing waves of about 30 to 50 every 2 to 3 minutes. But still, it's something to consider if you're trying to get those waves out, because you can't have finishers. I mean, your race is not going to go well if you're sending people out while you have finishers coming back in at the same location. So I stole a lot of pictures off of some of the Timers Talk Office of the Day, and we're looking for a common theme in all these pictures, and so again, we see the truss is there, and others is just cones. Everybody's setting up as best they can. Everything's a bit more narrow in some cases. A lot of people have talked about how they their equipment setup is less because they don't anticipate as many people. But even a race like Ironman Florida, you start looking around the outside, and that common theme, is the same as this. Now, granted, this build out took, probably days, and they've got an amazing LED board up above. But common theme here is you just don't see that many people around. And Ivan took a video of an event as someone was finishing. And again, this guy just finished. No one is around. No one at all. And we actually, not sure if the volume is going to work, but as we pass him, you can hear he was using RaceJoy. But again, like we saw that earlier picture of the Richmond Marathon. This was this year's Richmond Marathon. Still a great experience for everyone considering, but the build out was nothing compared to what a normal year might have. Ooh, let's see if I can. So with that being said, was every single finish line option shown have in common? There's no crowd, period. And so with the proper planning and it all starts in advance. So just keep that in mind. It's not something that just happens on race day. You really do need to plan through your packet pickup and your race start procedure. And by doing so, you can limit the bandwidth of finishers and crowding at the finish line. So again, we'll come back to not having kiosks or receipt printers or spreading out the food. And I realize that's not so much a timing thing as it is a race directing thing, but helping them show how to spread things out and have more lines that are spread out if there is anything given away. Like a lot of people are giving out the shirts at the finish rather than at packet pickup, just so it's one less thing to pick up and have to store if they're showing up to onsite. So again, that pre-planning really goes a long way. So once you've done that planning, just keep in mind, don't ruin it by then having gathering points at the finish. And so that also goes with limiting the award ceremony. So a number of events have done things like Zoom awards or something similar. And if you're not yet comfortable using Zoom or Google Meet or something like that, I would strongly advise you to get comfortable, because a lot of race directors are going to need direction on how to do it and how to set things up. And again, you can build this into your fee structure and your scope of services when bidding on the event. And that might be like helping them with backdrops or green screens or whatever, so that it's just more of an experience. Also, mailing out awards, and just as we've talked about mailing out things before, just making sure you're having that conversation of the extra cost that will be incurred by the race director. So the other things you can do, and we went over a couple of these, but pre-placing all the awards on a table. So having them laid out so that people can come up and take their awards is something that I would strongly advise as well. So timing considerations. It doesn't look like we have any questions so far, which is great. Again, we talked about some of these in the last call or the last webinar, but you're going to likely be using gap factors. So please make sure you have those set up correctly. If you're using race day scoring or race director, you need to make sure you have different distances set up with separate timing locations for each. And one of the big things to review, especially with race day scoring, is the ambiguous times. So if you click on the raw reads, there's actually a button at the top right that says ambiguous times, and you can see any other gap factors that were met for that athlete. So if you forget to put on filters for specific times where athletes could be in there, or if your times are so broad, like if you have an 8 to 10 hour window that people could run, they might actually come back and pick something up, or hang out and cheer their husband or wife or child on 30, 45 minutes later, and they might meet that other gap factor. So or they might watch someone else run first while they're prepping. So just keep in mind to review those ambiguous times, especially if you're timing with gap factors. Also, using clock times in the reports. So I would always suggest, and this is actually direct from Matt Avery, and he always suggests considering setting the clock time to midnight on race morning. And this is so it's a little bit easier to review timing data. And then something else to consider is when athletes are switching courses. So this is past the saying they want to transfer to a different event. If your race director gives you approval, you can bidirectionally sync in race day scoring on the participant screen. So just by selecting the other event, and you can do this by either verifying with RaceJoy if you ask them to use RaceJoy at the same time, or by if you have splits out on course, if they hit the half marathon split but never hit the full marathon split, and all their pacing shows that they actually ran the half and not the full. If given approval, you can switch those guys over, and it syncs completely within race day scoring, both within the results and at RunSignup. If you are not supposed to switch them into different events, the DQ button is on that same participant screen, and so you can remove them from the results as needed. So some other things that we talked about, but I just want to reinforce, because this actually goes a lot further with the finish line than it does the start line, and that is just making sure you're moving your splits closer to power sources, or considering generators at each split, or solar applications. And then also using 3G or 4G LTE modems and decoders for remote data access, and ensure you're having coverage. The only other thing that I want to add is, and I was actually on the, I think it was a Running USA call, and they talked about this as well on their timer side, and that is a lot of people don't realize that most of you have been remote timing for years, which is where this 3G or 4G LTE or PoE, if you've been timing with nano stations or what have you, and that is a lot of you aren't directly connected to the finish line, even if you're 10 feet away. So it's not that much of a difference if you are significantly further away. So it's just something to, if you're going to pitch that to a race director in terms of remote scoring or remote timing with your equipment on site, you know, pointing out that you might have been doing this for several years. It's just 20 meters versus 20 miles. And they likely didn't realize it at the time. So let's see. So with that being said, that wraps up the finish line. Not sure if we had any questions.
No, we didn't. It's actually pretty quiet today.
You guys awake? Everyone's still in their tryptophan hibernation mode? Or does anyone have any other experiences that they've had recently with their finish lines that feel like would be pertinent to share? And if not, we can wrap up 5 minutes early.
Yep, we have some good things happening next week, so we definitely want to make sure people join us next week. So on, we have actually, I'm not sure if people realize, we did have an email go out and we've had some promotion on it, but there's a our kickoff for 2021. So we have a mini symposium on Wednesday afternoon. So you want to make sure to sign up for that. And then next week on Tuesday, we have another Timer Tip Tuesday. That's the new race course that Chris will be going through. So that'll be more focused on the actual course experience itself.
Yeah. So Jamie just asked about sending out certificates and how to schedule them. So in most scenarios, you could do it multiple ways. One, the easiest way, and for most people likely the most effective way, is picking a day and time, like say 10 minutes after the result submission window closes. And you can schedule that out within the RunSignup email platform. And so you just quite literally click send later, and you can schedule it with all of the information. Thanks for participating. Here's a link to your finisher certificate. You could also set it so that you're doing it daily and make copies. And you could run a report and make a custom list of all the finishers that day. It is a bit more work, but you are targeting those folks directly, and I'm sure those people would appreciate it. But if your race is not 2 or 3 weeks long, then I would suggest doing it towards the end. Any other questions? Well, if not, feel free to shoot me an email, chris@runsignup.com. I'd be more than happy to go through or review anything that you have or any questions that you have. Or we can set up a training session as well if you're still wanting to or needing to get Race Joy certified, or if you're wanting, I know now is kind of when people are beginning to prep for next year, and with the hopes of these vaccines on the way and some races happening across the country, that we will be back hopefully in 2021 to some semblance of normalcy and in-person events. And so now is a great time, if you have downtime, to practice in race day scoring. It is a really powerful platform, and I know a lot of timers are getting a lot of really good use out of it right now. So that being said, thank you guys for joining us, and look forward to chatting with you next week. Bye.